Okay, we're now live, you and I.
Good morning.
And Jen, good morning. It's good to see you. You're having a good hair day.
Oh yes, it's my. I'm gonna go swimming today, hair day.
So I've entitled this Faranda and Mar. Mar and Faranda get multiple. So we're gonna oh, okay, you've added something to this.
Uh,
All right, so
I'm trying to get my name on there.
okay, I will use that app. So we're gonna put our names
How,
up.
can you put my name up?
No, I can only do myself.
Hmm. Oh, there it is. Maybe. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
There.
So we're getting multiple.
We're getting multiple. Okay, so as you know, I've gotten back into listing and selling. So
Mhm.
it's been interesting because when you're in sort of a different position where you're not listing and selling and you're observing, I think you have the opportunity to learn a lot, which I would never have thought. So I've had quite a few situations where there's been multiple offers, and being able to observe the behavior of the agents and even my own instincts, and being when you step back and you're an observer, when then you step back into the action, you're able to actually observe your own thoughts and reactions before acting on them. And I came to the realization that a lot of the things that are done when dealing with multiple offer situations are sort of based on, number one, what you think the other agent is expecting you to do, and number two, tradition. And so I think it's something that we should talk about, because I don't think if we don't step back and observe these things and talk them through, we're not doing the seller or the buyers any service. And you
Okay.
know of some of the situations I've been in.
Yes. Okay. So here's the question, and this is the first question, and it's actually the first part of licensing class. It is the first thing the law requires us to tell the public the first time we meet them in any substantive way, and it is the first question we should have the answer to in discussing multiple offer situations. Okay? You ready for the question?
I'm ready.
Who do you work for?
Um, well, it depends on the situation, but in these situations, mostly I worked for the seller.
Exactly.
Yes,
You work for the seller.
yes.
The buyer agent works for the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine being a buyer agent. You're running around. You're showing a lot of houses with them. They find a house they finally want to buy. Lo and behold, everybody else wants to buy it too. Because imagine a really nice, well-priced house in a good location. No one wants to buy it. Everybody wants to buy it, right? So
Right.
your job is to not make the buyer happy. Your job's not to make the buyer sad. Your job has nothing to do with the buyer's frame of mind or necessary satisfaction. Your job is to serve the best interests of your seller client. That is who you work for. In the one particular instance where I think you're referring to, the manager for the buyer agent accused you of not being an advocate for the agent.
Yeah.
How 70s is that? That is a archaic fossil relic thought from the sub-agency days when everybody worked for the seller. Even if they were running around with buyers, they worked for the seller.
And regardless, what does the agent have to do with it? Why am I advocating for an agent? If her argument was, well, you're not being fair to a buyer, it's not that that's a valid argument, but at least it has some placement within the ramifications of a transaction.
Yeah.
The notion that I should be doing what buyers expect and how everyone else is handling multiple offers, when if you can stop and think and realize that counter offering when there's two offers and you have a sticky situation with your seller having to leave, and you can't afford to lose one of those offers, counter-offering is not the best thing for your seller.
Okay, so here's let's draw out the scenario. First of all, we have to explain to some people that our local way of doing business here is peculiar compared to what they're used to. So, first of all, in the New York metropolitan area, you and I, as real estate licensees, do not prepare contracts.
Right.
Contracts don't get done for another week or two by the lawyers for each side, and prior to contract, we have this memo system, and and they do their inspections. So
it's
the
accepted offer.
Last.
Accepted offer. This is tradition. The tradition in our area. Accepted offer, inspections, memorandum of sale, contracts.
Right. Now there's people in Montana that are like, what? Why don't you just go to contract? Well, the New York Bar Association has an opinion that if we prepare contracts that we're practicing law without a license, or whatever the reason is. I think we can, but it has to be subject to attorney approval, and
Right.
At any rate, here there's this like nebulous period of a week or probably 2 weeks where you can have an accepted offer on a property, but in a legal sense, nothing occurs until all parties execute a contract. So here's what we had in your situation. We had an accepted offer on the property. It was not for full price. It was going to be something the seller could live with, and it would enable them to get out. They'd have to write a check at closing, I guess, but
yes.
It
was like a $5,000 difference for a short sale.
So $5,000 out of their pocket, and then another offer came. Now the people had done their inspection, and they were ready to sign contracts when another offer came in, and guess what? It was $10,000 higher than the other offer.
Right.
Now, there are people who will say, now, well, that's very nice, but we gave our word to the first people, and our word means something, and blah, 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 and we're going to stick with the first offer. And they can do that if they choose to. However, there are also people who, for them, this is business, and all things being equal, $10,000 more is something that they should engage.
But hold on. We did stick with the first offer. We did. We didn't immediately go to the other offer. We actually called the other offer and said, I just want you to know there is a much higher offer on the table.
Right. You did what I think any reasonable agent would do. Excuse me, broker. Which is you went to the first offer and said, you've been outbid. All right? At this point, and let's get away from that specific scenario. At this point, when there's multiple offers, the book is typically to go to all parties and say, please give us your highest and best offer.
Correct.
Because there's no contract, and because a verbal acceptance doesn't mean anything, all bets are off. Please give us your highest and best offer because we have multiple offers. This is our job when we work for who?
The seller.
The seller. When we work for the seller, our job is to get them the best terms possible. Now, the fact that this upsets the buyer is something I am sympathetic for.
Absolutely.
And it's also something that when I represent the buyer in situations like that, I fight like hell to try and mitigate. But the fact remains that my job is to get the seller the best terms possible when we do eventually go to contract.
Correct.
Okay. Now, this causes buyers consternation. Some of them have spent money on a home inspection, and they're not going to get that house, and they feel like they've wasted money. However, does everybody buy a house after they do their inspection?
No.
No, sometimes we do the inspection and we don't end up buying the house because the buyer chooses not to go forward because they found out something about the house that they don't want to take on.
Correct.
Okay? What was that?
Notifications.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. So let's flip this around for a second. If we're representing the buyer and we're told that there's multiple offers, it's not unreasonable for us to try and work our client's case, because in that case, who do we work for?
Buyer.
The buyer. So in that case, we're going to try and persuade the other side to not do anything rash. Look, you've got an accepted offer, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. Maybe there's another higher offer out there, but you know, we are 20% down, or we're solid. We've already done our inspections. Do you really want to buy your house back for $5,000 or $10,000 when you've got certainty? Now, we're going to sell our case, and in some cases, we've been successful in those cases where the seller's agent has said to their client, the book is to go to highest and best. But, you know, I've been doing business with Jen Maher for 10 years. If she's working with a buyer, they're solid. And while you may theoretically get more money from this other buyer, my advice to you would be to stick with Jen's offer, because their buyer has better terms. They've already done their inspection. And this other person is an unknown quantity. I don't know the other agent. I don't know if they've vetted the person carefully enough. I've never heard of this bank. It's 3% down. For all we know, they're going to do their inspection and then kill the deal, and then we got nothing because the first people have moved on. So our job is to do that. But in nowhere, whether we're representing the buyer or the seller, is it productive to have our feelings or any upset taint the proceedings, because that just, it's like a lifeguard trying to rescue someone who's drowning. The more they struggle, the more likely you're both going to drown.
Correct.
Okay? So you got to stop and let the lifeguard do their job and drag you back to shore.
Yeah, and more often, you can't make a good decision when your feelings are involved. Because my goal is not to have that other agent like me. Now, you said something that was really important. I've worked really long and hard to have great relationships with a lot of realtors, as have you. And that's where it can get confusing, because the goal is not to have is not about the relationship with that agent, or, you know, having a favorable outcome so that they like you more, or, you know, you win the popularity contest. But yet, those relationships are extremely important, because, as you said, when you are trying to persuade, your history and their knowledge of you and your work ethic is extremely important. But when you are representing the seller, you have to make sure to remove those feelings and think, oh, well, I really want so-and-so, or I've always wanted to do a deal with this agent, so I hope it works out and I'm really going to help them. You have to stop, and you have to really get away from tradition and what's typical, and make the best decisions based on the transaction at that moment in time, and what's best for your seller.
Okay, so exactly.
I think I see a lot of that not quite the case. We just jump to, you know, bidding wars and all kinds of stuff, and it's just not always the correct way to handle it.
There's no way to make everyone happy, and there's no one way to do it. Okay, we've been on both sides. There have been times when, in a multiple offer situation, we dissuaded our client from upsetting the apple cart and stayed with our first offer. And there have been situations where we have absolutely gone to multiple offers. And I'll give you a kind of a cute one. You have a $500,000 listing, okay? And some clown comes along and gives you a $380,000 cash offer.
Because cash is king.
Oh, because it's cash, right? Exactly. So it's cash, so that trumps the laws of mathematics. So, you know, their agent's trying to make a sale, and the seller is just like whack insulted. The seller is, you know, like they're kidding, right? And you know, you go back to the agent, and of course the agent is doing their job. Well, you know, it's cash. You don't say no, though. They don't withdraw the offer. There's no accepted offer. It's just on the table.
Right.
A few days later, somebody comes along and gives you a $450,000 offer. And you say, well, we happen to have another offer on here, so we'll need your highest and best. Well, how much is the other offer? Well, it's confidential. I work for the seller. I'm not going to tell. Well, that's only $380, so you should be fine. No, we're not going to tell. We're not. Right. We cannot tell. And because we work for who? In that case?
The seller.
The seller. Because we work for the seller, and because we're not obligated to divulge a confidential amount, that person, not knowing what the other offer is and not wanting to lose the house and understanding that, look, in multiple offer situations, oftentimes these things go for full price, offers a full price offer.
Right.
And it closes for full price when second place was $120,000 under asking. And we never have to tell them that. And that happens sometimes. And that's just us doing our job as advocate. Here's what consumers need to understand when they're making offers on property. Being first doesn't matter. Your feelings don't matter. The listing agent is not trying to deceive anyone. The listing agent is not trying to, or they shouldn't be trying to get their own offer accepted. The listing agent's job is very simply to work to get the best transaction terms possible for the person that hired them to sell the property.
Correct. And then on the flip side, now that we're getting into a market where there are more multiple offers, you want to make sure that you're working with a buyer's agent who is not going to do things just based on tradition. If a buyer agent senses the timing for even if a house has been on the market, and we've seen this a lot, house has been on the market 5 months, and all of a sudden it's getting multiple offers.
Which happens.
So if a buyer agent senses, you know, my buyer really wants this house, time is of the essence, and I think we're in a competitive atmosphere, they need to start presenting the offers outside of the box, not just how it normally is. You can make offers and say, we'll go to contract, then do inspections. You can, there's lots of different ways to present an offer that will sort of break the script of the norm of how things are done and could give the buyer a competitive advantage. And I don't see a lot of that being done. And when it is, the agents are so afraid, the listing agents are so afraid of, oh, this isn't how it's typically done, that they sort of panic. So I just like to see the tradition cycle broken a little bit in how we're handling these things.
Good. So you bring up a good point, and this is what I'll address right now. Maybe they don't have to send an offer that pops out of a cake. Maybe they don't have to get 2 out of the box. But is it too much to ask that you put the offer in writing and include your client's pre-approval or proof of funds? How many times have we gotten cash offers where they haven't provided proof of funds, or they say, well, we'll give you proof of funds once we have an accepted offer?
Phil, I have to tell you this. I don't think a lot of agents know to ask for proof of funds. They're so into that pre-approval. When cash comes along, they're like, oh, cash, and they don't even ask for it.
Okay.
That's a training issue.
It's a training issue, and it's also a tradition issue, okay?
Yeah, you're probably right.
You know that old
walk around all day long and say, I've got cash, and the agents are so like, oh, excited that they have a cash buyer. They don't ask for proof of funds.
Exactly. You know that old story that was circulating about how they always chop the ends of the ham off each end before they put it in the oven, and then the kid asks his mother, how come you chop the end of the ham off? She says, no, my mother always did it that way. So he goes to his grandmother, and he says, how come you chop the end of the ham off? And she says, well, my mother always did it that way. And then it turns out that they go to great-grandmother, why do you chop the ends of the ham off? She said, well, the oven was only about that wide. Of course, ovens now are a little bit wider.
We have that in my family, but it's eggplant.
Eggplant.
I broke the tradition of peeling the outside of the eggplant. The outside of the eggplant is delicious. I'm speaking to an Italian now,
I'm
so you
just
may.
admiring you how an Irish girl can eat eggplant. That's all right. Okay, you got me there. All right, so here's what we get. This happened to us recently. We have an agent who's been around since Methuselah was an infant. She lives in the complex. She used to be on the board of the co-op. You know, this is the grand dame of the complex. And she's very impressed with herself, and she makes an offer. She presents an offer on behalf of her client, considerably under asking, and there's no proof of funds. But she says it's a cash offer. And because it's a low offer and there's no proof of funds, my client's not interested. And nor should they be. And they don't care that it's Ethel Broomhandle, who's been around forever and laid the first brick of the complex and was a platinum super duper person in 1987. They don't care about any of that. They never heard of her. They don't like her. They just want to see proof of funds. What the buyer's agents who don't provide pre-approval or proof of funds fail to recognize, and this is something the clients need to understand also, is that the psychology of having the proof right there is compelling enough. It tells the people that, it also tells the people that you mean business. So it tells them you're ready, willing, and able. But it also tells them that you are motivated. Here is everything. This is my proof of funds. I have sat down at my computer, hit print, got a little Sharpie, redacted my account number, and burned 3.5 calories to show you how important it is to me to get this deal done.
Well, and then when you on the other side, when you're working with the buyer, I always explain to them that's their buying power. That's their buying power. So it's like if you haven't gone to that step to explain that to your buyers, you're not doing them any service.
Yeah, it goes back to the days when, you know, the customer's always right. We'll do it your way, Mr. Buyer. You know, it's a foolish thing, and it's poor advocacy. You're not doing your job as a buyer agent.
And oftentimes, true advocacy is where you actually have to inconvenience your client. And so we think advocacy means making them happy. They wouldn't need us. They're happy to begin with. Advocacy means, you know, pushing them in the right directions, pulling them in the right directions, often where they don't want to go, so that the end result where you should know what that end result is from your consultation is achieved.
Okay, let's talk about the discomfort of being an advocate, okay? You're a physician. You are the fiduciary of your patient, and they have a smoking habit. And you have to tell them, if you continue to smoke, you're going to die. Okay? They may not have a very good reaction to that, but it is your job to tell them. Max is barking. It is your job to tell them, he agrees, that you got to quit smoking. Or if you're a CPA, you are the fiduciary of your client. Right. You've got to tell them, stop writing off your kid's school's uniform. It has nothing to do with your business. Stop writing that off. I cannot do that. I cannot sign a tax return where you're writing off your date with your girlfriend. You can't do that. All right? We have to tell people the consequences of their ill-advised decisions. Our job is to advise them. Okay? The agent that simply says, okay, I'll show you property without any proof that you're able to perform, and I'll just take your word for it, and I'll present your offer without your ability to perform, and tell them to believe me because I'm a big shot. By the way, the people that are big shots never tell you they're big shots. Right? The agents that you never heard of are the ones that are still living in the 80s and when they were the hot shots. But, you know, the fact that you're a big shot means nothing to me. All right? Can you imagine going before a grievance board and saying, you know, well, you know, the other agent's a big shot. That's why I took what they said, hook, line, and sinker. So you're doing a bad job of presenting your client's offer in the best light and giving it the best chance for acceptance when you do not provide proof of funds for a cash offer or a pre-approval for a financed transaction.
And in the case of that one offer that we're talking about, with not explaining the process to them, so what the end result of that was, we stayed with the first lower offer. We warned the first lower offer there was a much higher offer on the table, and it was the difference between, it was $10,000 higher, but it was actually $15,000 higher because they wouldn't have to cut a check. So we explained all that. So Friday we start the weekend with that we're sticking with the lower offer. Monday morning comes, I get a phone call. Oh, and now, by the way, because they were ready to move forward, all inspections done. Monday morning, phone call from the agent of the lower offer. Oh, by the way, we're now going to do septic, well, and something else. And not even like today at noon. We're coming Thursday, Friday, blah blah blah. And that's when I called my seller and said, hey, all things being equal, these, buyers number 2 could get their inspections done and contract signed by the time these guys are done playing around.
Right. So the first offer stopped being certain. So when they abdicated their advantage of being the certain offer, you had to go with the higher, better offer. Mm-hmm. And the first people were very upset. And these are the people that actually contacted me, and they still didn't get it. I got to tell you, the people on the other side, their representatives, did a deplorable job of explaining the process to them.
And their only argument was, well, but you didn't give us a chance to counteroffer. You were aware, by the time we didn't accept the second offer until they did their inspections. Yeah. And came back. So by Tuesday late afternoon, the second offer did all their inspections, and then we went back. So it was almost a full week of them knowing, I think it was Thursday, that there was a much higher offer on the table.
Right. Just to clarify, because we're oversimplifying things, that when the first offer became shaky, we went to the second people and said, well, we can't proceed with you until you do your inspections. So do your inspections, and then we'll know if we can proceed with you, and that's what ended up happening. So just to recap, because we said we were going to make these shorter.
Yes.
And this is over, by the way, when you say it's over, but I just want to recap this point. Who do we work for when we're the listing agent and we're fielding offers on behalf of our seller?
Seller.
We work for the seller. The buyers need to understand that our job is not to give their agent some sort of perceived courtesies.
Exactly.
Our job is to get the best deal for our seller, period, and we have to do it in a fair way. We have to do it the right way. But when we're disclosing these things and we're telling them, here's your chance, and they don't take it, there can't be any sour grapes.
And I think I learned a little bit of a lesson with all of this, having been in the CEO position during the whole, REO distressed property boom, because no one does a better job of removing emotions and relationships from a transaction than an REO broker. Sometimes to the extreme, but nonetheless, it was a very different experience observing those brokers and then having my agents come to me crying, well, they didn't let me do this, and he didn't do this, and he didn't do that, and she, and when I sat back and think, well, they don't have to. Their job at the end of the day is to get the best number for the bank, and the REO brokers really brought that to light for me. And so, as I said, sometimes to the extreme, but at the end of the day, it's not a personality contest. It's not a popularity contest. We just have to get the end results that our clients are looking for.
Any sale that involves an institution, whether it is bank-owned foreclosure or a corporate relocation situation where you might have a relo company, or where there's a dispassionate third party out there, orchestrating things that we answer to. They don't care that we went to high school with the buyer's older sister.
Right.
They don't care that we really like the other agent in first position and the agent in second position, even though they're $50,000 higher. You know, they're kind of a creep.
Yep.
They don't care about any of that. They're trying to get the best deal on their books because it's all judged by the math. This is business.
Exactly.
So,
but on the end note, that's how you and I became friends, was on one of those type of deals.
Yes. Yes, that's true. That's true.
So there is opportunity to you can do your job and represent your seller and or your buyer fiercely and still gain the respect of your colleagues on the other end, even if you're not operating the way that, you know.
If you understand that the agent on the other side is doing their job, you can unplug yourself from the emotion of the situation, and you can admire how they do their work. And yeah, what happens between the lines, as they say, should be very different from what happens outside the lines.
Right.
All right? And that's an instructional thing for the public to understand as well. We all have our job to do, and the listing agent's job is not to advocate for the buyer. Just like when you go into court, the lawyer on the other side that, you know, is representing the person that you're suing doesn't owe you any courtesies either. Now, real estate is not nearly as adversarial, but it is one where you need your own advocate given the stakes, given the financial stakes. This is the largest transaction of most people's lives, and they need a trusted advocate.
Exactly.
Do you have anything to add, or is there a part two?
Well, I think we've covered it.
This covers it?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to end the broadcast now, and I thank you for a better than a cup of coffee wake-up call on Saturday morning.
Have a great day.
You too.